Jealousy is one of the most powerful emotions that a human being can feel. It can drive people to commit all kinds of acts through desperation of wanting something that somebody else has. Whether this is something as simple as the latest smartphone or the envy of someone else's looks, jealousy is very powerful, and this case illustrates that perfectly. You are about to learn how jealousy of someone else drove a person to murder. Before we begin, we would like to send out our sincere condolences to the friends and family of Rachel Barber. In 1999, Rachel Barber was just 15 years old. An extremely talented dancer, she was said to be on the fast track to fame and was a full-time student at the Dance Factory in Melbourne, Australia. The Dance Factory describes itself as the #1 dance studio for nurturing Australian talent, which they say ranked among the best in the world. As well as her talent, Rachel was a very beautiful young girl. Everyone who knew her loved her. She was slim, athletic, and intelligent in equal measure. From a very young age, Rachel had shown a flair for dancing. She constantly danced around her home and bedroom. After begging her parents repeatedly, Rachel was finally allowed to go to dance classes, where she excelled from day one. Her parents were told of her potential and even ripped up the carpet in the family home, replacing it with flooring more suitable for Rachel to practice her dancing as much as she wished. Despite being intelligent, Rachel had little time for what we would call conventional studies, such as math, English, and science. She felt these studies could hold her back in her pursuit of a career on stage and screen. She asked her parents to take her out of mainstream education and enroll her at the Dance Factory. Clearly, this was a risk. If a career in dance didn't work out, Rachel would be left with nothing to fall back on afterwards. But not wanting to deny their daughter her dream, they agreed. March 1st of 1999, the Barber family had woken up in the morning and were going about their daily routine. Rachel was always given a lift to the local train station by her father, where she would catch the tram to her friend's neighborhood, meet up with her friend and boyfriend, Manny, before walking to school. She never caught the bus, despite her confidence inside the dance studio. Outside of it, she was something of an introvert. But March 1st would be anything but a normal day. Michael, Rachel's father, dropped her off at the train station around 9:30 in the morning and said he would pick her up at 6:15 in the evening at that same location. Rachel hugged her father and told him to have a nice day. But what neither of them knew was that would be the last time they would ever hug each other, and for Michael, it was to be the last time he would ever see his daughter alive. Rachel traveled as normal to a place called Richmond, met up with her friends and boyfriend, who also studied dance at the Dance Factory. Rachel's friends said that she made a strange statement on the way to school. With much excitement, she announced how she was going to make a lot of money later that evening, but refused to say how. Due to her looks and figure, it was assumed that she had landed some sort of modeling job in which she expected to make a lot of money. During the day, at lunchtime, Rachel and Manny both went to a nearby shopping center and had something to eat together. Afterwards, Manny, who still remained curious about the money that Rachel was going to earn, he asked her again, "What is it you're doing tonight? Is it safe? Surely you can tell me." Rachel still refused to say what the job was. She just said she was going to meet an old friend who had gotten her a job, but that it was to remain a secret. She did try to put Manny's mind at ease by saying that the work was harmless and she would be able to keep some of the clothes. This clearly wasn't going to be a waitressing job. She said that she stood to make a lot of money in one go, demonstrated by the fact that she had seen an expensive pair of shoes while out with Manny. She had wanted the blue dancing shoes for a long time but could never afford them. But there and then, she asked the cashier in the shop to put them on hold for her until the next morning, when she would return and pay for them. School finished at 5:35 in the evening. Manny said the two shared a hug and said they both loved each other. Rachel then promised to call him later in the evening. Strangely and completely out of character, Rachel said that she needed to catch a different tram to go elsewhere to meet her friend. Although he could not have known it at the time, the sight of Rachel walking off to catch the tram would be the last time he would ever see her. The Barber family were, and probably still are, creatures of habit. They lived by a routine, and they were extremely punctual. Rachel and Michael would always be home for their evening meal before 6:15 p.m. Elizabeth, Rachel's mother, was home preparing the meal for the family. 6:15 came and went, with no sign of her husband or daughter. At first, she wasn't too worried. Perhaps the traffic was worse than usual. But as the minutes passed by, 6:30, 6:45, 7 o'clock, Elizabeth was now finally worried. At 7:40 p.m., the phone rang. It was her husband. She was, of course, relieved that he was okay, but that was all the good news she was going to get. Michael, very concerned, explained that Rachel had not shown up at their usual meeting point outside of the train station. Elizabeth immediately called the police department, who were, less than helpful. In fact, worse than that, their response was actually shocking. They told her that, she's a teenager, and like all other teenagers, she will go through a rebellious phase, and that she would probably come home soon. But Michael and Elizabeth believed that something had happened to their daughter for good reasons. In the past, Rachel had been followed home on a couple of occasions by some creepy men. She was also afraid of the dark and would not stay out in the dark on her own. But most importantly for them, they had always allowed their children to live their lives. For example, they could not and did not stop Rachel from having a boyfriend. They encouraged open communication with the family. As a result, Rachel felt that she could talk to and confide in her parents, as she had always done in the past. She had no reason to run away or hide anything from them. But of course, Rachel had hidden something from them, the so-called job that she had planned for that evening. Michael and Elizabeth called Manny, who explained that he had not seen Rachel since school, but shocked them when he explained what the job was that she was going to do. Disappointed and shocked, Rachel's parents called everyone they could think of. None of her friends had seen her since school and had gone off in a different direction from the tram. The family, left with little other options, now went back to the police department and explained to them all they knew. Despite their desperate pleas from Michael and Elizabeth, the police refused to file a missing persons report or to help them in any way. March the 2nd of 1999, Rachel's parents had spent a nail-biting evening at home. Having been refused any help from the authorities, they now took photos of Rachel around the streets themselves, asking if anyone had seen their daughter. Having spoken to Manny again, they discovered that Rachel had put the shoes that she so desperately wanted on hold at the store. Elizabeth and Michael visited the store, only to discover, perhaps unsurprisingly, that Rachel had not been in to pay for those new shoes. But their trip to the store was not a complete waste of time. It led to an interesting and disturbing revelation by one of the store's assistants. She explained to Rachel's parents that a man had been in the store in the last 2 weeks. He was trying to recruit girls to work in what he called his entirely legal brothel in Fitzroy. Of course, this development did nothing to make her parents feel better, but at least it was a lead. The store assistant gave Michael and Elizabeth the number that she had been given by the man immediately. They called the brothel themselves, asking if anyone of Rachel's description was there. Amazingly, this was, on the face of it, a legitimate business. The person on the other end of the phone said they never recruited girls off the streets and always made sure that anyone who worked there was of legal age. Naturally, Michael and Elizabeth were relieved that Rachel was not working in a brothel, but once again, they were left with nothing to go on and a daughter who had seemingly vanished into thin air. With law enforcement still refusing to help, the local community decided to take the job on themselves. Many local people came out and gave their time, spreading out and searching far and wide. By day 3 of Rachel's disappearance, the police now looked lazy and incompetent, and they knew it. It wasn't good for PR, to say the least. The local community was doing their jobs for them while they seemingly sat behind their desks drinking coffee with zero concern about a missing young girl. Finally, the police, perhaps out of sheer embarrassment and the weight of public pressure, decided to join in the search, starting with interviewing everyone Rachel knew at the dance factory. Maybe you won't be surprised to hear these interviews never really took place. The police didn't give any reason for it. They did, however, speak to Rachel's boyfriend, Manny. First of all, they suspected Manny was involved. It wasn't an illogical conclusion to come to. In a lot of cases like this, the partner is often involved. But Manny had a solid alibi. Despite this, police weren't finished with him yet. They now moved on to a new hypothesis. They assumed that Manny had gotten Rachel pregnant, and in a bid to hide this from her parents, Rachel had run away. Manny denied this on numerous occasions. It seemed the police, having come to the investigation at a late stage, were now clutching at straws and trying to back up their original theory that Rachel had left home of her own accord. Rachel's parents disagreed and quickly sided with Manny against the police and stuck to their belief that no matter what problems Rachel may have had, she knew she could still go to her parents with anything. The police now had hit another dead end and seemed unsure how to act next. Their small contribution to the proceedings had done little to improve the now poor reputation in the local community. March the 4th of 1999, a new piece of information comes to light. It was a big one. A friend of the Barber family named Allison, who hadn't realized that Rachel had gone missing, called the family. Amazingly, she just found out about Rachel and had seen her the same day she went missing. Allison told the family that she had seen Rachel with another girl on a tram and getting off at an intersection between High Street and Williams Road. The police were immediately informed of the developments, and it was the first positive move in the case. They went to review CCTV footage, which confirmed the story that Allison had told them. All information about Rachel and her disappearance was now released to the press, and the story spread like wildfire. This was a sensible move by police. After all, the more people who knew Rachel was missing and what she looked like, the better the chances of finding her were. But on the other hand, it also added more pressure to the police, not just from locals, but from the whole of Australia. Police now requested a list of anyone who knew the family and Rachel. One such person was Caroline Reed Robertson. Caroline and her family lived in close proximity to the Barbers, but had since moved away and they had lost touch. But Caroline was included on the list for police because she had called the Barber family on March the 7th asking about Rachel's disappearance. Police now pulled phone records relating to the Barbers, cross-checking anyone who had called to offer condolences or to inquire about Rachel's disappearance with those who had called before she had gone missing. It was noted that Caroline's call on March the 7th was particularly short and to the point, not like the others they had received from friends and family. Having checked phone records, it was discovered that Caroline, who had, let's not forget, lost touch with the family for several years prior, called the Barber household not once, but twice, on February the 28th, both of these calls lasting approximately half an hour each. Furthermore, police made another very interesting discovery. Caroline was renting an apartment not far from the last place Rachel had been seen alive, at the tram station. Rachel's parents were immediately informed of these discoveries. Both Michael and Elizabeth felt a sense of relief come over them. Perhaps the police had been right all along. Rachel, for whatever reason, had gone to stay with Caroline. They had known each other fairly well in the past, and Caroline, who was a few years older than Rachel, used to babysit for the family. Now they believed that she might be safe. Police found out that Caroline worked at a nearby store close to her apartment and went to interview her. Unfortunately, Caroline had called in sick that day, but this wasn't the first time she had been out sick. She was also called out on March the 1st, the same day Rachel had gone missing. Caroline, according to her boss, had come back to work on March the 2nd, but then was back off sick for the rest of the week with the flu. Instead of speaking to Caroline next, police decided to speak to her neighbors. More than one of them remembered hearing loud sobbing on the night of March the 2nd coming from the direction of Caroline's home. One neighbor described the crying as sounding similar to a toddler having a tantrum. They did discover that her father had come to see her when she was sick. He explained that the whole time he was in her apartment, she bolted the bedroom door shut and refused to let him in, crying uncontrollably. Caroline's father owned quite a few properties, one of which Caroline was going to move into. The problem was she couldn't drive and needed money to hire a removal company to move her possessions. Her co-workers all said the same story to police, that Caroline had asked to borrow money from them so she could afford the moving. As it turned out, this was all true. On March the 4th, a removal company did come to Caroline's apartment. The men were then told to transport a statue to the new property. The statue had been placed into a duffel bag, presumably for extra protection. Along with a few other possessions, including furniture, the statue was transported to Caroline's father's hobby farm in Kilmore. March the 12th, police felt they had gone as far as they could with their investigations into Caroline, who, it seemed, apart from being pretty good at calling in sick to work and making a few phone calls, hadn't done anything wrong, at least not on the face of it. They now went to Caroline's apartment, hoping to find Rachel inside. During their first visit, no one came to the door. They returned the same day at 5 p.m., and again, no signs of anyone. But this time they were more insistent, and they broke into the apartment. Upon initial inspection, apart from the place being a bit of a mess, nothing really seemed out of the ordinary. But it wouldn't take long for police to make a startling discovery. Upon opening the bedroom door, they entered and saw, no, not Rachel, but Caroline, face down on the floor, unresponsive and motionless. Initially, police thought she was dead, but they checked and she did have a pulse and was immediately rushed to the hospital. As Caroline was whisked away in the ambulance, police continued searching the property. There were no signs of anyone else. In the words of the police themselves, it was a desperate attempt to find any traces of Rachel. They did discover a bag full of clothes, all size 8. Far too small for the larger Caroline, but it was possible they could have fit Rachel. The police then made a much more sinister discovery. They noticed that large amounts of notebooks had been scattered around the room containing copious amounts of notes. When they began to read the notebooks, they found they were full, cover to cover, with very personal information about Rachel Barber. But these notebooks weren't just full of information about Rachel, they contained information about Caroline as well. More specifically, about her plans on starting a new life in nearby Byron Bay. But this wasn't just moving to a fresh spot where nobody knew her. She wrote down how she planned to have plastic surgery, completely rearranging her facial features and changing her name. Caroline had planned effectively to disappear with a completely new identity and face. Most chilling of all, this was no bluff from Caroline. Police investigators found the official paperwork needed to change her name. That paperwork had been filled out in full. The name she had chosen for her new life was none other than Rachel Barber. Police now rushed to the hospital to question Caroline. It turned out that she had suffered an epileptic seizure when officers discovered her on the bedroom floor. She was now awake and fit enough to be questioned. Police quizzed her about Rachel, and it didn't take much probing for Caroline to talk. She was asked where Rachel was, and Caroline responded, "She's dead." Police put two and two together and quickly assumed that the statue that Caroline had moved to her father's land probably contained the body of Rachel. They searched her father's land and came across a break in the woodland near a creek. That's where they made the grim discovery. The lifeless body of a 15-year-old girl, Rachel Barber, had been dumped on a soggy patch of ground with a cord still tightly wrapped around her neck, left to rot. As soon as she was well enough to be discharged, Caroline was taken straight into police custody. In early 2000, Caroline went on trial for the murder of Rachel Barber. The defense put up by her attorney was that she suffered mental abuse throughout her life and that her parents had failed to give her adequate support. As you can imagine, this didn't get them very far. She had written her entire murder plot out with bullet points in one of the notebooks that police had discovered. 1. Offer Rachel a job. 2. Tell her she can't tell anyone, not even her boyfriend, and so on. She carried out the murder point by point. She made a pizza for Rachel, who was drugged, and then she strangled her. Rachel's body was kept inside a closet in her bedroom for 2 whole days while she pretended to be sick from work. The notebooks revealed in court showed how Caroline's obsession with Rachel and her life had been going on for many years, all the way back to when she used to babysit for her. In a sick and twisted mental fantasy, Caroline actually believed that by assuming Rachel's name and getting plastic surgery, that she could somehow automatically become her. She was sentenced to 20 years behind bars for the murder. But because the Australian justice system is similar to the lenient system in the UK, this wasn't quite the end for Caroline Reed Robertson. On August the 10th of 2013, the apparently reformed Caroline became eligible for parole. The parole board was allegedly willing to grant her release under strict conditions, but after a massive public outcry led by Rachel's mother, Elizabeth, the decision was reconsidered.
The parents of a teenage dancer who was strangled by a family friend 13 years ago have expressed alarm about her murderer's possible release from prison. Rachel Barber's parents warn that Caroline Reed Robertson is a manipulator who may try to trick the parole board.
But on January 20th of 2015, Caroline applied for parole again. On this occasion, it was granted, despite another public campaign and Rachel's family voicing their concerns over their safety. A very different Caroline walked free, to many people's surprise. Caroline was unrecognizable, slim, with straight blonde hair. Rachel's mother even commented on the fact that she did look like her own daughter, the girl who had been killed by Caroline. Maybe a stint inside had not stopped her plans for the future. Caroline had apparently been in a relationship with another inmate who was an armed robber, and the pair planned to live together on the outside. As time had passed by, Rachel's family have never believed that they got real justice for their daughter, nor did they have any real closure with Caroline Robertson just living on the other side of town to this day. They fear more than anything else that Caroline will one day attack and kill another person. Rachel Barber was a talented, beautiful 15-year-old girl with a bright future ahead of her, a future that was tragically taken away. From the moment she could walk, she was obsessed with dancing, a dream that she was able to pursue all the way up until her extremely premature death. We will never know what she could have become in the future. Perhaps she could have been a star on stage or screen, just as she had always dreamed. We can only hope now that she's living in eternal peace from the pain and grief caused by one jealous, disturbed woman who once called her a friend. Rest in peace, Rachel Barber. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment down below your take on it, and subscribe to the channel. Less than half the folks who watch our videos are subscribers. It's free and easy, and it makes it possible for us to continue to bring you great true crime content. Also, hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new, shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.